Let's see what Pragerus has to say about Tyre Nichols and police brutality.
The public's reaction to the deadly beating of Tyre Nichols in Memphis in January 2023 has been virtually unanimous. A clear-cut case of police brutality. The cops agree. Police executives, rank-and-file officers, and union representatives from across the country also expressed their strong disapproval. The president of the Fraternal Order of Police, Patrick Yos, denounced the incident as a criminal assault under the pretext of law. NYPD Commissioner Keechant Sewell described the Memphis officers' conduct as disgraceful. Here's why they're right. After the initial encounter with Nichols, body cam footage shows one officer saying to another that Nichols made me pepper spray myself. A second officer seemed agitated at having had his glasses knocked off during the struggle, later saying, "I hope they stomp his ass." A third appeared to have hurt his leg in the melee. But none of this excuses kicks to the head, punches to the face, or baton strikes doled out to a man who was not resisting.
Well, even if the person was resisting in some way, if they weren't like being physical, there is, well, even though, even that, there is no justification for striking people in the head when cops are trying to restrain them. Um, Especially when you got several bodies, you can just, grab them and put them in handcuffs. And once they're in handcuffs, they can't do anything and they become a non-threat.
What it looked like was an unjustifiable beating handed out by hotheads. Though it's little consolation to Nichols' family, Memphis authorities didn't hesitate in punishing the offending officers. All 5 were swiftly terminated, arrested, and indicted for their outrageous behavior.
Well, there was a few others. The person said, I hope they stomp his ass, was Preston Hemphill. He got fired, but I don't think he got charged. I can't remember right now. There were some other, like, I think EMTs that arrived on the scene, but did nothing to help. And it's truly messed up. These cops were just out looking to beat people, and uh, Tyree wasn't the first victim that had a bad encounter. And this is not the first time cops will be doing something like this, and not until it won't be the last until there's actual police reform.
But this isn't enough for some. We need to show the world what lessons we can learn from this tragedy, District Attorney Steve Mulroy said during the press conference in which the charges were announced. Perhaps the lesson is simply this: policing is a human endeavor and is therefore subject to the shortcomings of inherently flawed human beings, which means that some people, cops included, will sometimes act out of malevolence.
Right. But when a doctor or a nurse acts out of malevolence and kills people, they don't have a police union that usually backs them up unless there's some kind of good evidence to show otherwise. Um, for the most part, most of the time, uh, the police union and the police order will support cops no matter what they do and get them back their job if they've been fired. Um, a few cases they haven't, but that's not always it. For the most part, they're protected. Doctors, everybody else who does the same thing, no. Um, they're treated differently. We're never like, that nurse killed somebody. Let's, maybe that person deserved it. Maybe they, weren't, obeying, medical orders or whatever.
To the activists, however, bad police officers are not the exception, they're the rule. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, for example, grumbled about the effort to separate the officers who murdered Tyre Nichols from the system of policing that produced them, going on to assert that charges alone aren't justice, change is.
Yeah, because we need actual police reform in order to prevent more cops from doing this and actually getting away with it because most cops get away with their crimes. We shouldn't have to have some kind of viral video in order for black people to get some kind of justice.
But there's good reason to separate the officers who beat Nichols from the institution of policing. Their actions constituted a sharp departure from police training and practice. The available data show this to be true. What activists often term police violence, contrary to what you may have heard, is extremely rare. This becomes clear once you view use of force numbers in their proper context.
Okay, but how valid are these records that we're getting? Cops hide uh, a lot of their abuses. They falsify documents and stuff. So how can we be sure? What about the people that don't speak out about their encounters with cops because they're afraid of retaliation by the cops?
Unjustifiable force is even rarer. According to data compiled by Police Scorecard, a website built by left-wing police critic Samuel Sinyagwe, Memphis police had been involved in 25 killings between 2013 and 2021, a period in which Memphis police officers made some 288,000 arrests, to say nothing of other encounters such as traffic and pedestrian stops.
But that's still one too many. Cops aren't there to kill people. They're not judge, jury, and executioner.
Now let's look at the biggest department in the country. Between 2017 and 2021, the NYPD fielded more than 30 million calls for service and made over 1 million arrests. Over that same period, New York City cops fired their weapons in just 0.02% of arrests and used force of any kind in 3.5% of arrests.
Okay, but out of like 30 million, that's a good percentage of times to be using force. So, I mean, what are you really saying here?
In other departments, force rates are even lower. A 2018 study found that over a 2-year period, officers across 3 police departments in North Carolina, Arizona, and Louisiana fielded over 1 million calls for service. They made more than 114,000 arrests and used force of any kind in less than 1% of those. And just one of those encounters involved a fatal police shooting. The deplorable actions depicted in the Memphis videos are simply not representative of policing as an institution. It's also worth noting that police reform advocates have gotten a lot of what they wanted over the last several years.
No, there hasn't been any actual police reform, so that's a lie there. Still looking for, a divestment of funds from cops and into the community so that we can actually build up the community. Looking for the removal of qualified immunity so that cops aren't protected for whatever crime that they commit, and much more.
Between June 2020 and April 2021, 30 states enacted more than 140 police reform measures, according to the New York Times. City councils and police departments also enacted reforms of their own. That includes the Memphis PD. These reforms may constitute wins for activists demanding change. But have they made our streets safer? The public doesn't seem to think so. In a 2022 poll of likely voters across the country, more than 2/3 of respondents said that they felt less safe than they did 2 years prior. Their fears are well-founded.
Okay, what 2022 poll are you talking about? Because if you took a poll of 10 people, it's easy to say 2/3 were saying whatever.
In 2020, America saw a 30% increase in homicides, the single largest one-year spike in over 100 years.
Well, before that, there's been a record drop in homicides. 2020 was an odd case because of the pandemic.
The Major City Chiefs Association, representing 70 police departments, reported that in 2022, there were roughly 36% more aggravated assaults than there were in 2019.
Okay, how many of those were by the police assaulting, their own spouses and stuff? About 40% of, police are domestic abusers.
The crime spike has hit Black communities the hardest. A recent study found that in 2021, black men were shot to death at a rate not seen since 1990, meaning that in just a few years, all of the progress that community has seen over the past quarter century was lost.
Wow, now Pragerus wants to care about black people dying.
As much as some might want to deny it, a thin blue line divides order from chaos.
Right. So what happens? Who brings order when it's the cops that are committing the crimes, when it's the cops that are harassing people, murdering people, raping people? Because let's not pretend that doesn't happen. Yeah, no, cops don't bring order. They commit a lot of crimes themselves, and they get away with it.
Police brutality should never be tolerated, and we should work to reduce it. But making good policy requires an honest look at the data. And the data say that police brutality is the exception, not the rule. I'm Rafael Mangual, Senior Fellow at the Manhattan Institute, and
Yeah, no surprise here. Prager wants to try to say that uh, police brutality rarely happens when it happens more often than not.